Hello and welcome back to this episode of Uncover the Human. It is just Christina and I here today, living it a solo.
Right after we
The
had a
solo
podcast
duo.
about, right after we talk about the word just being banned from our vocabulary.
Anyway, it's just us today.
But it's not just us. It's our
It's never just
listeners
us.
too. It's never just us.
You are a
And our
third
podcast
party.
producers and our marketing specialists.
Let me add a lot of qualifiers to my sentence. It's just us on the recording today. We're the only voices you will likely hear until ghosts invade the machines.
Yes, it's us on the podcast, no guests. And we are going to talk about a post that Alex actually put out today, which is going to be a few weeks before this one goes out, but it's okay.
This is actually kind of a funny tie-in because, as you can tell, our mental state is maybe not at full capacity, and that's one of the things we wanted to talk about. We wanted to talk about the difference between potential and capacity. So this was defined in a book I was reading recently. It was Bruce Schneider's Energy Leadership and Working with the 7 Levels of Energy on the Energy Leadership Index. And he talks about the difference between a person's potential and their capacity. And a person's potential is all of the things they can do and they have the ability to do. But capacity is your in the moment, how much of that potential is actually available to you. I mean, there's going to be, it's like a sports analogy would be something like, you could be a great athlete, but if your ACL is torn, that's going to reduce your capacity to deliver your athleticism. So that you may have massive potential, but you only have so much capacity available at any given time. Mm-hmm. And so while this podcast has potential, our mental capacity is at 80% currently. So this will be our 80% gig.
Well, it's a good thing it's going to be short. But it's a really important reminder to keep in mind, clearly. God, I think my capacity is going down to 10%.
We've just dropped to 70.
I know. But it's really important because there's an ad that maybe other people see on LinkedIn that keeps popping up for me from a company that honestly I don't really know what they do, but it's the ad itself is it's really truthful. Because it talks about how we wouldn't wait to charge our cell phones when it goes down to 5% capacity. And yet we expect ourselves as humans and other humans to be operating and not recharging until they're down to 5%.
Yeah. And we often treat like recharging as this thing that you do so you can get back to 100% of your work. But recharging is something you do for life. I mean, you are a person who has certainly plenty of potential, but at any given time you only have so much capacity. So what can you do to keep that capacity up, both for yourself, your work, whatever you want to dedicate that to? But you only have so much energy available to you at any given time.
Yeah, it also reminds me of it's tied into so many things in the workplace, because one of the big gender diversity issues is that typically, and by using typically, I degeneralized it, but it's generalized enough. Typically, men are promoted because of their potential. Women are promoted based on the perceived capacity, which explains why there's some ungodly number of centuries that we have to wait for gender equity to be happening in the workplace.
Yes. Yeah, I can't remember what the current trajectory was in like 180 years or something.
Yeah,
Melinda Gates has a good review of it, but if we work at the current pace, basically we're waiting 180 years or something for actual gender parity.
Yeah, I think there's a better chance that dinosaurs will come back by then than the gender parity. But that's the thing, is like, why do we do that? Why is that the bias that we promote for potential when it comes to a certain gender and for perceived capacity? Also, because capacity changes all, in different moments. So perceived capacity of the moment for others.
That's a great point, and that's a perfect example of using potential versus capacity. And I think it's flawed on both sides. I mean, that generally will benefit men for being promoted and they'll get other opportunities and salaries and whatever because of that. That will definitely lean that way. But you also then have a bunch of people who are promoted that may not be able to deliver on that potential that you decided that was there. And that's still also, that's even perceived potential at that point, because if you're never going to deliver on that, if you're constantly operating at 10% capacity but you have huge potential, then you being given more responsibilities is going to hurt everybody. So not only are you potentially missing out on because you're judging women by their perceived capacity, you're also kind of screwing over the whole organization if you throw a bunch of people out there because you think there's high potential that they will never actually reach.
Yeah. Well, and think about the leadership promotion. Well, and again, leadership is a big word because leadership is an act, not a noun. It's an action. It's the journey, not the title. So think about people that are promoted to management positions and in charge of others. And for most of the times it's done because of potential, which is not bad. It's not enough. Perceived potential is very subjective. And as we've talked about millions of times before, a great individual contributor does not equal a great manager or a leader. Sometimes, rarely, sometimes it can, but it's not an automatic thing.
Yeah. And this is a little bit reductive version of leadership, but that I'm about to define. But if we think about leadership as far as potential and capacity, leaders are there to increase the capacity of their teams. They are there to make sure that blockers are removed, to make sure that things can be delivered, that everything that can happen so the team can meet their own capacity and increase their capacity is there. So your potential as a person is much less important than your capacity to increase other people's capacity the second you become a leader. That's now your job. You're there to make sure the team can work. Not to make sure they do work, just to specify, you're not there to go breathe down their necks and task manage. You're there to ensure that their capacity is high enough to get there. And that requires meeting people wherever they're at. I mean, you're going to have days where you've got some issue going on in your personal life or whatever that is going to affect the workplace. As we always say, you're the same person at work and at home. So you don't get to just severance those away. Great show, by the way. Go see that. But
there's a show about that.
Yes. Great show about separating work and life. A very good thriller on Apple TV. So I assume they will sponsor our podcast now that I've mentioned it. But because of that, like your capacity might be diminished because of something you're carrying from your personal life. And as a leader, you're there to help protect for that. Like you can't just demand full potential at all times. Nobody can meet their full potential at all times. So help people with their capacity. And that's now your job, not just you had high potential as an individual contributor.
Yeah, indeed. So if we were to dissect the potential and capacity pieces, it's, we would look at defining them, I would say. What's your definition of potential?
Yeah.
And what's your definition of capacity? Is your definition of capacity somebody that gives 110%? First of all, there's a math problem to resolve there. Nobody can actually give 110%.
Hardly stretched reality.
I know. And also it's back to, do you expect your cell phone to give 110% all the time without recharging? So why are you expecting that from humans? Why are we expecting it from ourselves? Because it's not just others and us, it's ourselves.
Yeah. We can have so much shame and guilt internally for like, I'm just not showing up as well as I know that I can. I know I can do better. I know I can do better. And that's probably true. At all times, we probably can do better than we're doing. Every single moment of the day, you can probably do better. So maybe it's okay to let go of the expectation that you should be doing better at all times. Maybe it's okay to make that your new accepted reality that, I could do better. And I will strive to improve. And I'm happy to strive for excellence in general, but it would be unrealistic to believe we can do that all the time.
Yeah. Well, and it's a huge component to be able to have self-compassion around that. It's, I would say, necessary in order to have compassion for others. If we are berating ourselves for not being able to give 110%, so becoming superheroes and not being able to do it at all times, and we do struggle with accepting that of ourselves, there is no way that we are accepting that of others. There's no way we're not judging them. There's no way we're not expecting the impossible. There's no way that's not going to show up in the way we interact with them, in how we evaluate them, and how we promote them.
And I think saying that phrase, expecting the impossible, is like the number one way to drive psychological safety right out of your team. Like if it's known everything is impossible and you're still expecting it, that's going to be a real tough go.
Yeah.
And it brings up, like, you want to give 110%. There's lots of articles, and we'll happily promote the idea that, like, you do have to get out of your comfort zone to grow. You do have to push yourself beyond what you think you can really do to learn how to do whatever you're trying to approach and do. And that's great. It's not saying you shouldn't stretch, you shouldn't try. It's saying that you should also know when you've hit your capacity or there's something else influencing your capacity, and you're just not going to be able to show up as much as you would like in X arena today. If you can allow for that in yourself, you can then allow for that a lot easier in other people. And that will make everybody's life a little bit easier, because you're not expected to be 110% and then just feeling guilty the times when inevitably you will not be able to do that.
Very true. One of the pieces to incorporate maybe is to actually check and ask, like, what if part of the psychological safety is to actually allow for people to not show up at 100%? And making sure that they know that by checking. Like, I love Brene Brown's, where are we today? Check in with a team. It's like, well, I've got 50%, didn't sleep last night. Actually, I'll probably have 10 if I didn't sleep last night. So I'm operating at 250% over what I think I could without sleeping last night.
I'm overestimating my capacity currently.
We have times when, we used to do that with a team, and we should probably do that a little bit more, but we used to do them as a team. And, on some days, especially when it was crunch time, when things were very stressful in society, in our lives, in work, it was like, okay, let's check in with a team. We've got 4 members and everybody's at 15%. Again, if we do some math, it means that as a team, we're not even getting to 100. Great.
Yeah.
Since we have the luxury of not saving lives for a living, then let's figure out how to change the expectations of what needs to be done today or this week to match the team's capacity, as opposed to expect the team to increase their capacity through super gummies.
I think Mario
some
mushrooms,
external thing.
No, I'm glad you brought up the life-saving piece too, because if you think about it, I truly desperately want my surgeon to be honest about their capacity before they cut into me. Like, please, if you're going to be performing surgery on me and you're at a 30%, please reschedule.
Please don't.
Please tag someone else in. Which brings up the importance of having this understanding even in life-saving capacities. Like, yeah, with your team, you can't get up to 100%, then know what you can do in the corporate world. Maybe just okay, we'll have to, maybe that means changes of deadlines. Maybe that means we wait until we have some more capacity to get to the harder pieces of this project, or whatever you have to rearrange. But also, please do that in the life-saving fields. Because you are saving lives.
Yes, definitely. And approach it as that's not a judgment. It's okay for one person to say I'm at 10 and the next one to say at 80. Then again, this is not a performance review. We're not gauging, what's going on. If it does turn out that, it's less than there is less capacity than expected, or less capacity than we would accept, which again, debatable, from someone, then get to the core of that. What is causing that? Or maybe they're in the wrong role. Maybe there's something major happening in their family life or outside of work. Maybe it's, they need to leave. Maybe they need to, they're not in their working genius. Maybe they're in their working frustration. So do you actually know what could potentially put someone in the environment to give the capacity they have and reach the potential?
And that leads to something I was just reading from Emer this morning about she posted about vulnerability in leadership. And I think that's the leaders have the ability to lead by example on this one. Like, go in there, and when you are feeling 60%, 10%. Let them know. And let them know why. Let them know that that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Give them the example that I expect this to be okay. Even if I am the leader, I'm not here to show up and lie to you all and tell you I'm at 100% every day. I want you to be honest because I don't want to frustrate the team.
Yeah, take the team down. I mean, that's a huge thing because now it's about hiding the truth and pretending to be at a level that we're not, and then hiding mistakes. I mean, there's so many. There's an avalanche of problems that come out from just not
Right.
being truthful.
And imagine if you didn't do the investigation you're just talking about, if you didn't figure out why
Yeah.
that capacity is dropped. I mean, is the person in the wrong role?
Mm-hmm.
And I think people get very squiffy about these things. They're like, well, I'll just have people coming in and lying and saying they're at 20% and not doing a lot of work. Like, okay, but that's a pretty easy trend to find, for one. And second,
Yeah.
like the thing that we always go back to, if you can't trust your team, why did you hire them? Why are
And
they on
promote
your
them.
team? Yes. If you can't trust them about
Yeah.
like doing the work
Yeah.
and they aren't bought in, like you've got a different problem altogether than the person coming in and taking advantage of your system to
Yeah.
estimate capacity.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So many people, so many things there. And just understanding it's the human piece. It's understanding, okay, everything is subjective. So again, like if I have an idea of potential, where am I getting that idea from? Is it wishful thinking? Because I need someone to actually be operating at the potential I want them to so that I can delegate.
Yeah. What are the consequences when you don't match that up? When you don't match up your capacity and your delivery? Like even I stepped into this one earlier this week. I was just not at full capacity, and I had a mentor coach call, where I had to. It's part of the coaching program we're going through, and I had to go do some coaching and be evaluated on it. And I knew from hours before this wasn't the day for it, and I didn't really want to reschedule. And it showed the evaluation wasn't great that day. But these are the damages you do to yourself and your work
Mm-hmm.
if you aren't honest about the capacity. Because I can do much better than that in general. And if I'm actually honest with myself, I know that I have higher capacity or have a higher potential than that. And I also had lower capacity and knew that at some level that day. I just took no corrective actions, and so I walked right into the swinging bat. Like that one's now on me. Like, knowing these things and allowing them, you can save yourself and set expectations for yourself and others a lot easier, and make sure that it is a little bit more understandable. And that way you're not constantly stressing about like, oh, I'm really not feeling good about whatever's happening in my life today. But I am showing up at work and I have to like make sure that I keep on a happy face
Mm-hmm.
this whole time. Like at that point now you're spending so much energy just keep that face up. You're not going to get the work done either way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think Emer's post today actually mentioned that too. Is it's not really about good or bad. It's not a judgment. It's more about the self-awareness, and then the sharing and awareness of the team is more about what drains you and what energizes you. Again, not good nor
Yes.
bad. It's what drains you and energizes you, which goes back to if you're always at 10% capacity because the work you're doing drains you, that's a conversation to have. And as a leader or somebody with a
Mm-hmm.
title, that's the conversation to have. It's not why aren't you performing? According to whom performing? Who
Mm-hmm.
set that standard? And is that standard the right standard for this person in this role?
I think is a quote that is at least attributed to Einstein. I don't know if it was actually his, but I think the if you judge a goldfish by its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its
Mm-hmm.
life thinking it's dumb.
Yes.
you,
Yeah.
you put the wrong metric out there, it's going to be difficult to measure up to that. And capacity is really important to understand for that reason, because what if you are drained because you're just not in a role that's helping you at all? You can't
Mm-hmm.
really perform well at this. This isn't, like you were saying earlier, in your zone of genius. This isn't something that you can deliver on, and it will
Mm-hmm.
inevitably drain you. Now you're going to be at 10% capacity, and who is that helping? It's not helping the person experiencing it. It's not helping the team. It doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
that person is like a worthless individual who has no potential, and that's why it's important to separate potential and capacity. Your
Mm-hmm.
capacity may be very low for what work you're doing. Your potential could be very high in a totally different arena, and you can increase that capacity moving towards that.
Mhm. So what do you think when hiring someone or adding someone to the team or staffing a team or any of those? What's the balance of potential and capacity and making that decision easier, or at least not easier, but as much as more intelligent?
That's a good question. I think the it's easy to say that like as a baseline you'd want somebody with decently high potential for whatever role you're hiring for. You want them to have that. But I think to be able to evaluate some amount of capacity, you'd probably want to ask questions around some self-awareness, right? Understand how well do you know when you show up? How well do you work with others? How well like the things that are the day-to-day interactions on the job that would be impacted if you don't have self-awareness and understanding of your own capacity. If you have I think it would be hard to sell even myself on the idea of like finding somebody who's low potential but meets that potential every day. That's is that growth? Do they have the potential to do more, or is that fine? I guess it really depends in that case somewhat on the role.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. It definitely depends on the role, and there definitely needs to be that it's not just about potential and it's not just about capacity. So having to find that balance. It's too easy to fill a seat, to fill just to check the box, and not really do it from a human perspective. Of it's not just about a person in a role; it's about the right person in the right role and the right environment around them.
Like if you hire somebody to like run communications between departments, but they hate talking to people and communicating, it's going to be a hard time. You can't just throw that person into that role. Yes. It's not going to be successful for you. And yes, you'll have somebody technically in that seat, but the function still isn't getting done, or at least getting done to its potential. And then now we're in like a discussion about the potential of the role itself.
Yeah, and what's being created to make sure that the potential of the role is realistic.
Yes.
Because again, like every role has a potential, but is the environment actually there to support that potential? Or is it just a vision, an idea?
Yeah. And what if you've hired somebody who has way higher potential and capacity than the role? What if that person is ready to take on something? Are you ready to receive that? Are you ready to help them grow? Can you go play that capacity somewhere else? Because if not, they'll probably go find it somewhere else. They'll find somewhere else to be.
I would say that's the sign of a really good leader, human leader, is that the leader recognizes that the person is in a role that's way below the capacity and potential of the person in it.
Yeah. And not being threatened by that, just knowing that that's the right thing to do to move that person.
Exactly.
I liked you've talked a while back about the idea that like if a flower doesn't grow, you don't yell at it for not growing. You change its environment. Like you water it more, you put it in the sun, whatever, take it out of the sun, whatever's not functioning. So you think about that, every seed has the potential to become a tree or a flower or a bush, whatever it is that has the potential. So why don't they all reach that? Well,
because they live in my house.
To capacity.
So there is no potential for growth of seeds in my house. And it's 100% because of the environment.
Exhibit A. The plant graveyard that is Christina's house, apparently.
Exactly.
Oh, but that's exactly it. They have the potential, but the capacity is not going to be there because there's not the water, the sunlight, the person watching for that, apparently.
Exactly. Because the responsible party is definitely dropping the ball and has no knowledge whatsoever on what to do with the ball when they pick it up. Yeah, there's a couple of plants that I actually survived. They have now survived. I think they're like a year and a half, and I have no idea how that's possible. Why they're still alive?
So, that's a high potential plant that we couldn't have recognized.
I know. It's a high potential plant that has a high capacity of surviving on its own with very little conscious care.
It figured out its own capacity, and that's the kind of
Yes.
plant you want to keep around.
Yes. That's an individual contributor
right.
that it definitely deserves stars. It does not depend on anybody else. And it just continues to grow.
I'm not knocking the power of metaphors here, but it is a little funny that our company is about humanizing things and then we make a lot of comparisons to plants and machines.
Well, maybe our clients should answer this question more than us, but we do much better with humans. Let's just say that. I can help a human grow. I can help a pet grow in my house. Plants, no. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, once you go from the animal to the plant kingdom, there's a translation barrier there.
Yeah. It's a communication issue.
We're literally breathing different gases at this point. So. But an example of how we need each other. So that one goes back to our other podcast about needing each other in an ecosystem.
Yes, exactly. It is an ecosystem. Think about for yourself and for your team, what's the potential? What's the expected potential? What's the expected capacity? And where does reality fall? How do you find out? How do you check in with your team? And again, not once. This is not a medal winning competition. It's not about getting the medal and being done. It's every day, every time. And then
practice.
Go through the judgment. You are gonna have judgment. You are gonna feel disappointment. You are gonna want to snap, but then recognize that and be like, oh wait, do I ever not have 100% capacity? Oh yeah, I kind of do, like the other day. So maybe I can be a little more gracious and patient.
And think about that for your team and yourself too. If you can accept like, hey, today I'm at 60% capacity, that if we try and force 100% out at 60%, you've basically incurred a 40% debt on the next day. I mean, the next day you're going to be more tired because basically you spent a lot of energy trying to force something that couldn't quite get to there. Whereas if you can live with, hey, you know what, today is going to be 60%. I wish I could get more, but this is just where I'm at. Save that energy for the next day when you're like, man, I'm glad I reserved that. And now you can play whatever catch up you need to play. If you're feeling like you're falling behind, or you feel like there's guilt there, like you can either incur more and more debt over time to yourself and your team, or you can be honest and help yourself live much more sustainably and have a much happier and much more fruitful long-term outlook.
Yeah, and it's probably very similar to sleep. So one of the things that I've read recently is the fact that if you sleep, let's say 4 hours tonight, you don't actually get that energy and time and recovery back by sleeping 12 the next night. It actually takes multiple days of resting to recover from the loss on the first night. And it's the same thing for capacity. It's like if I am at 60 today and I try to give 100%, it's not a 40% debt. That's just the next day. I don't have no idea how long it's going to take to recover for that debt.
Yeah. And if you gave yourself just a 60% day, you could go back and maybe the next day you do feel like 100%. Now you can access that instead of having that debt you now have to pay from the previous days. Even if you had 100% capacity, you can now only live 80% of that the next day, or whatever it is, whatever the conversion rate may be. Probably just depends on how drained you are by what. But it's an interesting concept because you can long-term burn out your team, or you can go through the judgments, take the hit, think about the disappointment, and allow yourself to have a different choice so that long-term you're still all playing at the top of your capacity more than your potential.
Yep, definitely. So I would say go out, self-evaluate, communicate, be vulnerable, be the first one to say, I'm at 20 today. Where's everybody else?
Yeah. And unlike the experience it will be for everybody where it is an ongoing practice, this podcast can wrap up. We can put a gold star on it.
Yes.
We did reach the finish line on this one.
I know. There is a finish line. Or so we think.
To be continued.
Yes. In our heads, in our own